error handling, this whole category 7, it's basically about not showing any error messages to the users that haven't been hard coded. So, if your application is in production, it shouldn't have, debug mode or development mode turned on. You shouldn't be having exceptions being printed out to the front end, because what ends up happening is they'll contain stack traces. Stack traces will have file names and path names, and might even have a little bit of the code of your file that's running. And these are all hints for attackers that allow them to delve deeper into your system. Just from that info, I can see what kind of operating system are you using. I can tell you, what is the language, what language and framework is used to build this app. These are all things that I can start maybe what dependencies are being used. These are all things that I can start using to find ways to break into your system. Oh, okay, this is a Windows system. They're running Node.js, and they're using, let's say, I don't know, underscore or something like that. These are all things that, there may be some vulnerability out there, some publicly known vulnerability, which underscore has many. Underscore is the name of a Node.js package. And I can try to use that to break in. It's also, you just don't want to give any hints, any extra stuff to attackers. Some of the other things you might want to pay attention to in this category are things like, so that's error handling. The other thing is logging. Don't be logging anything that's sensitive. You don't want your logs to contain anything that you don't want anybody in your company to know about, like your users' credentials or private data that your users wouldn't want some random employee knowing.
Yeah. What are some situations that you've seen, like common mistakes that the clients they make for this one?
Yeah, well, that's one for sure. Especially, so stack traces are a big one. I see that a lot. And it's one of the easiest ways to find SQL injection is there's all these ways to find SQL injection. One of them is, you just put a little apostrophe and see if it breaks, and then put another one and see if it recovers. But another one is you just put, and then even then it's sort of a guessing game, who knows why that broke. But sometimes you put a single quote and then it comes back with the SQL statement is broken because of the syntax here. It's like, okay, well, thank you for that information. I also now know that you're using MS SQL Server, and I know the version and all this other stuff.
That's interesting.
So, the other thing that I commonly see is in logs. We commonly, because I think when you build an application, especially when you're testing, you're not thinking about all the stuff that's going into your logs. It doesn't, whether it's private or not, you're just looking for as much information as possible because it helps you to debug things. But then once it goes into production, it's important to go back and change those things, because it's very common that an application, like we see clients who they have been logging patient data if they're a health or health app, or credit card numbers, things like that.
I see. As you told, but one of the other things that I've seen is that sometimes the clients, they think that they're not storing anything sensitive in the logs, but suddenly I show them that they're storing like bearer tokens and some sensitive headers.
Right, tokens are another one.
Yeah. The reason is that sometimes developers, they get lazy, and instead of logging exact thing that they want, they start to log the full header.
Exactly.
And they start to log the cookie, bearer token, and everything. And that's one of the bad practices that I've seen. That's the other thing. Other than that, this category has some subcategories. Actually, how many of them? There are 4 subcategories. The first one is log content requirements. We have already discussed that we should always log some stuff, such as authentication failure, authorization failure, authorization success, deserialization failure. These are the important stuff that we need to log. And also, we shouldn't log any sensitive information. Sometimes, in some instances, we have had clients that, based on the compliance requirements, they shouldn't log any, even email addresses, any PII. And PII email is one of the PII pieces. And the solution was to log the hash of the email addresses, or any kind of the anonymization thing that you can implement. Right. And if you just put the hash, then there is no issue, because later on, You can find which email is there, but it's not like reversible actually.
Right.
And the exactly log processing requirements, actually, we have already discussed about that. But the other issue that I see is that, especially like for the clients that they have like hybrid situation or on-prem environment, they
Mhm.
start to log stuff like unencrypted in on the server somewhere, like. And
Why do you think you see that more in on-prem or hybrid situations?
because for when they're using cloud environment,
Yeah.
they use like Azure Monitor or CloudWatch. They can send the
Right.
logs there, and there's a central place, and you can encrypt that. But for on-prem environment, actually, they start to say store it in any files, and which is not good actually, because
Mhm.
like there's some you store something sensitive there, and now you have like an Nginx vulnerability,
Right.
RC or something like that. And now in the logs they can access like, I don't know, access token of the admin, and that could lead to like bad and dangerous situations.
Yeah.
And the access control for logs is important, and log protection requirements, like as we have discussed, this is another subcategory. And there's another thing, like especially in Canada and US, and we have teams that right now I'm in Vancouver, Jared is in Toronto. We have different time zones. Always we should map the logs based on a UTC time zone. We should put the UTC, because if Jared starts to use like Toronto time or start to use Vancouver's time in my code, then we cannot identify what
Yeah.
exactly has
Doing
happened.
forensics will be really hard.
Yeah, forensic
Yeah.
would be a nightmare after that. And we would suggest to assign a unique ID for each error or
Mhm.
exception. And always you should have like a last resort error handler. And I can say like I've seen tons of 500 internal server errors, and sometimes they could be very dangerous because there is an unexpected behavior from the server, and that is something that we always should avoid actually.